Hello, ¿cómo estás? Muy bien. Mucho burrito. Hi. Sarcastic, what's going on? Big Bob, Ghost Hunter. Welcome.
Welcome in, everybody.
Hello. How we doing?
Big
Welcome
Bob,
to Nerd.
Ghost
I
Hunter.
had really, my hair's calmed down a little bit. During my earlier meeting, I took my hat off and rubbed my fingers through my hair, and boy, did I have good hair.
Yeah.
It was really good. I was on camera with people from Europe. I took my hat off, and we all had a good laugh.
Europe.
We all had a good laugh. Somebody said that was Clark Kent hair. I don't know what that means.
Clark Kent hair, like
It's
the
like
wavy.
my alternate, my disguise hair.
the little wisp in the wave.
It was not that. It looked like a Halloween costume. not gonna lie. It looked more like a Halloween costume, like a wig. Some sort of crazy wig.
Welcome in, everybody. We're doing Hairswordfacebits today.
Things and stuff. And stuff and things. I'm going to do some bright pale yellow and some golden brown. And I'm going to start with the hair, because where we left it yesterday was that I was going to take a look at the shine of the hair before making too many more decisions on where to push the facial highlights. So that's my plan. Hair. Yesterday, if you weren't here, we painted that. Fur.
Yes, it was a delightful workup.
Fur. We did fur and face. We worked on the face too. We brightened the face up towards our light source. And now we got to work on the hair. The hair, when we last saw our wonderful hair, it was golden brown was the last color we used.
Right.
And I think it might have been mixed a little bit with dark golden brown. So the first thing I'm going to do is see how we go with just a little bit of golden brown in here.
Mechanic Guy's Imposter. Resub for 12 months. Thank you for that sub.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Always appreciate those subs.
I appreciate everybody in here.
Oh, we're getting retired 11Bs rating with 13.
What?
Welcome in. Fresh out the gate.
What's happening, gang? Welcome to whatever today is.
What's today?
Tuesday, I think.
That's not true.
Is it not true?
No, I'm just stating that it isn't.
No. But,
I think
so it is true, but you're lying and saying it's not true.
It feels like it's Tuesday.
Okay. It feels like a Tuesday. Chris is, are you on drugs?
I am not.
Like get well drugs? No? Okay. Chris needs to be on some sort of get well drugs. He's not, though.
Was battling some food poisoning. Took me out for a couple days, but feeling better. I don't sound great, but I'm feeling pretty good today.
He didn't have the chicken, though. He had the
chorizo.
The chorizo. So.
Hey, team, another question for y'all. Working with Noosh and seeing it stained some of my gray base coats, would this be because I put too much paint in the Noosh mixture or not enough water? Thank you so much.
When you say stay, meaning that you got more of the color that you had mixed into the Noosh on the model at the end, it could be from a couple of things. Not enough Noosh, right? The more Noosh you add, the more it dilutes the color, so the less impactful the color will be overall. Or that you just left the color on the model too long or longer than you wanted after applying the Noosh. Remember that the longer you leave the Noosh mix on the model, the more it stains, the more tinting effect, we'll call that it has across the surface. So you need to be, judging. Like generally what I do is I'll put the Noosh on, when I'm playing around with it in a particular situation. I'll put it on the model and then I will take it off quickly and see what effect it has, because you can always put a little bit more on, right? So if you take it off too fast and it doesn't give you enough coloring, then you can put a little bit more on. Leave it a little bit longer. Take it off. See what I'm saying? So play around with it, but if you leave it sitting for too long on the model, it starts to have much more of an effect of that color tinting the base layer. So can be great, can be bad, depending on what you're looking for. If you're just looking for a hint of the color that you're using the Noosh for, then take it off quicker. If
Got
you want
it,
more,
thank you.
leave it on longer.
I think I need to change my ratio a little bit and then work faster to take it off. I think I left it on for too long, was working on a Land Raider and maybe got too froggy with it.
Okay. Yeah, and remember, don't do especially on something big and bulky like a Land Raider, don't do the whole thing at once. Break it into parts. Do the front part of the top, then do the rear part of the top, and move around the model like that, so that you're never trying to force or having to force yourself into a position where you're having to work super quick to get it off of the entire surface. You'll feel like you're in a race and pressured, right?
Tired 11 lines looking good.
This is Antonio El Tigre. I'll have you know.
PNG
Thank you.
not.
This is the legally
Antonio.
distinct Antonio El Tigre.
Mundus, welcome in.
Primarch of the first chapter.
Super duper John, this model's evolving every time I make my way in here. Yep, we started this model a couple weeks ago. Started with the face, worked our way into some of the hair bits and then the black armor. And then we did the non-metallic gold primarily last week. And then we started yesterday with the fur cloak and brightening up of the face. And now we're here.
Somehow we got here. Every day, Christopher tries to tell me what I'm going to paint. He tries to push me, gang. He tries to force me.
I ask every time.
He asks.
Hey, what are you gonna do
he
today?
asks, so today you're doing the sword, right? That's how he asks. I'm like, wait, no.
No, I said, hey, what about the sword? Or
yesterday we did the cloak. You can kind of see what we did. We used emerald green, the dark emerald, as a shadow. And then various colors like warm yellow, bone equivalent, and then some warm flesh. You get some nice coloration there. I like it.
Mundus is asking, is Liquitex matte medium a good thinner for pro acrylic paints?
You can use it. Our glaze wash medium is better, but only because we make better stuff. But if you have their matte medium, you can definitely use it. I find it to be a little thick, so you want a little bit of water with it too. But our glaze wash medium works great if you're in the market for something. But yeah, like I said, if you already have the matte medium, you can use it for sure. It's a good acrylic medium. I just always found it was a little too thick for me.
PNG, not JPEG. Emerald green is a shadow. I can see it, but how to achieve this alchemy? Yeah, if you watch yesterday's stream, we used that dark emerald in the shadows of the fur. Yeah,
gives it a funky fur, alien fur color, you know, that doesn't, it allows me to pull the yellow that I used for the kind of lion style fur. We have people walking on the roof, Chris, that's going to make your camera bounce the whole time.
I just noticed that, huh?
Yeah.
Here, let's do this one. They've been here for a while, yeah?
We need to probably go see if we can tell them that they can't go stomping across the roof, you know?
Okay.
See if they can put their ladder inside the courtyard, maybe.
Yeah.
Might have to get the key and open the courtyard for them. Because what they do is they have the ladder out here, and they're walking the whole distance to get to the unit that's back at the back.
Oh,
so if you can open the gate for them, have them remove their ladder to the back. That way they don't walk right here. Okay. That'd be great. Thanks. Oh, you got it, Gabe? Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Gabe.
Didn't even think about that. Sorry, gang. The shaking of the camera is because we have a crew here working on the building to get one of our heaters back functional. So we'll see if we can't get them to get that fixed. Don't even think about it till it's a problem.
A stream to warm up a frigid day. Nice. Sure, it's really cold around the country. It was cold today too. It was 29 degrees up in my house.
37 down here. People shouldn't have to live this way.
I had to cover up all my pipes.
Yeah, freeze warning last night, right?
Yeah. And oh my gosh, the wind up in my place.
It was crazy down here, man.
Oh my gosh, it was at one point I felt like I was in like a legit horror movie with the sounds outside.
Oh, it was howling?
Oh my gosh, yes. It was so loud.
I like that. It's like very
calming.
strange, but
Yeah.
it's kind of calming too at the same time, right?
Yeah.
Whenever I'm doing things like the hair and the beard, I'm trying hard to make sure that when I'm highlighting, I'm pulling some of these a little bit lower than others and staggering the height so that it doesn't make it look too monotonous. With the highlight, you got to be careful because a lot of times our physical brush stroke will be the same length because of how our fingers move, right? So if you just do a mechanical repeat of each brush stroke like I do, all your lines tend to be the same length, and then it looks too uniform. Doesn't look natural like hair will be, various lengths and amount of pokey outiness. So I'll come back and
pokey outiness.
That's a technical term.
That's scientific.
Go to the doctor and like, how's your pokey outiness doing?
Uh-oh.
That was the wrong doctor.
Quick question from Skinner. Are you shaping the brush into more of a wedge tip than a sharp tip? It looks flatter from the camera. If so, is there a reason for this sharp point I see so often?
Yes. As a matter of fact, so much so, we have a video for it called Chase the Point over on the YouTube channel.
Yep.
I'll show you real quick. So the way to get a tremendous point all the time on your brush is to kind of bring it and flatten it out. So when I take the paint off of my finger over here on my thumb palette, that pressure will kind of flatten out the tip, see? Gives it kind of a chisel tip. But then when I rotate that 90 degrees, look how sharp that is. Right? And then I'm painting with that sharp edge of the flat surface, which takes longer to deform than a standard pencil point would, right? And then I can paint with that sharp point, right? Like a pinpoint. And then the more I press, the more it flattens that out, right? And flattens it out that way. And then I rotate it 90 degrees and I have my sharp point back. So I call it chasing the point, because you're painting for a little bit, and as your point starts to dull out, just rotate the brush 90 degrees and you get your sharp point back immediately. So if you can get used to using your round brush like a chisel like that, you'll never have a problem with finding the point. Now, there are times where the spread chisel tip doesn't work as well, and you'll want to round it back out when you're like dotting an eye or doing stippling and things like that. Or sometimes, doing a specific scroll, like freehand type thing, you'll want the point back. So you can always get that. But for the bulk of what I do, I use that flattened chisel tip that the round brush does so well. I don't want to buy a chisel tip brush because it can't go to a point, right? So some people ask, well, they do make like a cat tongue and other shaped brushes. There's a company out in the art world right now that's selling cat tongue brushes as something new to the hobby. And they're cool, but you can get a round brush to perform the exact same function, and it will also go back to being a round point when you need it to be. So I prefer that.
Super John, take it easy. The Lone Toaster sub for a month. Thank you so much. Always appreciate those subs.
Yep. Source does has got it chasing the tip.
Chasing the tip.
Chip. We're tip chasers.
Chipper?
That sounds horrible when you say it out loud. I don't know. Feels like that could be a 911 call necessary. I found a tip chaser. But yeah, it allows me, like right now, I've got that done. I start off with more of a chisel, right? And then I just rotate it to where I've got that nice sharp corner of the brush now rather than the point. And it lets me get in here and do really fine pulls of paint along these clumps of hair. So you can imagine like using the blade of the chisel as my drawing tool, so to speak here. Keeps the point from deflecting because it's a nice long chisel tip. Again, it's just using the shape of the brush and altering it as needed to get more out of it. more or less depending on what you're looking to do. So identifying the surface I'm about to paint and how the angle of the brush would like to be to get the best paint laying down. All right, so not going to brighten up this side. I'm just going to add that color to this side where our light comes from and let it fall off into darkness again as it goes around the back of the head. And now I'll go in and mix in some bright pale yellow into my golden brown.
Jared Tetlow, good evening. Welcome in. First time chat.
Welcome.
Appreciate you coming in. You're tuning in. We've been painting this bust for the last couple weeks. You can check out our past VODs.
When you say it like that, it makes it seem like I am so slow.
Well, this one is a very unique bust. This was the new format, too, of us, testing out like what to film, what to record, all that. And also just being able to capture a lot of really good pieces on this model. So, I mean, but technically it's not really that slow because you've only been doing it for 2 hours a day.
He says, so we've been painting this for the last few weeks.
You know what I mean. You all know what I mean.
Freaking Chris, man. Freaking Chris.
So we're on day 55
Yep.
of El Tiglo. What's his name?
Yeah, boy, it doesn't even matter anymore. It's been so long. The joke's dead.
138.
It's like when we did the snap chain. It's like take 272.
Yeah.
Like, I hope he gets this finished. So now I'm doing the halo of shine that hair will create. Right? So I'm just staying to that front area and pulling this mix of bright pale yellow and golden brown into a usable shine along the front or crown that the hair makes. And he's got his hair pulled back, in like the old man cover a bald spot way.
I definitely loved that addition of the brightness to the face yesterday.
Yeah.
You definitely, like, just looking at it this angle, you can really see the difference from the day before and yesterday.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Safety Bear. See, this is the level of detail I don't think I'm ready for.
Nothing wrong with that. The idea is the same, though. You can imagine, like, maybe you're not doing the level of shine on hair, but think about doing a fur cloak, right? This is no different than the fur cloak detailing that we did yesterday. So you might have, like, a Chaos Warrior that has a fur mantle to his cloak or something, and exactly what I'm doing here is what you would want to do to really make that fur cloak come alive, right?
Mm-hmm.
So always try to view what we're doing both in context and out of context for the specificity of what I'm painting. You may say to yourself, I'm never going to paint a Space Marine bust that's this big. But what you are going to do is use all of these brush techniques and all of these coloration techniques on even small models because it doesn't change. You can say that, I don't have any models that have that big of a head, and so I don't have that detail on my Space Marine hair, but you do have that level of detail on their cloak. Right? Or on your fantasy dragon's neck mane, right? So even though the scale may be out, the concepts stay the same.
Darkest Max. First of all, greetings from Peru.
Hello.
I have been interested in your starter pack. However, I've heard that it is a bit difficult to make combinations. I would like to know firsthand from you what tricks there are to make those combinations a reality. Thank you very much for your time.
What do you mean mix the paint?
Maybe. I think so.
Our paint mixes better than any other hobby paint you will find because our paint is made exactly the way high-end art acrylics are made. Other paints are not, unless you're dealing with Chimera or Scale 75's tube acrylics. Right? Most hobby paints don't mix very well because the pigment basis that they use is not meant to be mixed. It's meant to give you a really, really good color and opacity. Think of it like house paint is the analogy we make, because most of the hobby paints are made by companies that do house coatings. And those paints are not made to mix. When you go buy a house paint, it's not meant to mix with other color. It's meant to give you a really good opacity to put on the wall. But it's made with a bunch of pigment that when you mix them together start to gray out and desaturate, because they're not like your green may not have a really true green pigment as a base. It may be a bunch of other colors that make green, blues, yellows, and etc. Whereas our paints are all made from a true base color that represents the color you're wanting. So when you go to mix orange, it's not yellow and red, it's an orange pigment, right? So your orange doesn't dissolve out into yellow and red and then influence the other color as yellows and reds. It is orange. So when you mix it with green, you're going to get whatever orange and green, whatever that brownish color is going to give you, it's going to stay true to hue. Because remember, acrylic paints and pigments are subtractive mixing, not additive mixing. It's not like light. It's not when I take orange and green and mix them together, I now have a third color. No, what you have is orange pigment and green pigment, and they're so close together that your eye makes a third color out of them because it can't distinguish those fine pigments being so close to one another. It's still only orange and green. They never mix, technically, right? They don't dissolve together magically. And so the more pigmentation you have, the harder it is for your eye to distinguish anything, the more out of focus it becomes, the more grayish and desaturated it becomes as you mix. Because we start with the solid base color, orange starts with orange pigment, then you're going to get orange, and if you put your green next to it, it's green pigment, and orange and green gives you as few pigments as possible. Now, the green may have 2 or 3 pigments in it, but they're all arranged around that green, so they stay green as you mix. And the orange may have multiple pigments to make it brighter or darker, but it's all based around the orange, so it stays orange as you mix, which is what you want. That's how fine art is supposed to work. You're not supposed to pick up colors, mix them together, and get something that looks like mud, right? And so all of our colors, whoever's telling you they don't mix right is wrong, plain and simple. All we do is mix. I mean, we mix on a dry palette, and that's what we built the paint to do. That's the whole reason that Pro Acryl exists, is to get over the pain of trying to mix hobby paints together and never really being able to get the color you want or like. You lose vibrancy as you mix, not with us. Colors remain vibrant and true to the hue. That's the whole reason we made Pro Acryl. It's a great question. But sometimes we get so embedded in the fact that that's just what we do that we forget to explain. So that's a nice halo on the hair.
Darkest Max, hopefully that answers your question. Welcome in, everybody, for tuning in. We're continuing with Anthony L. Tigre today. Did the fur cloak yesterday. Now we're working on the hair today.
Just mixing some bright pale yellow with golden brown to get in here and start to highlight the halo of shine that will occur on hair. And even though the beard is not quite the same shape as the top of the head, you know, with regards to the curvature of the follicles of hair and clumps of hair, we still want to catch a little bit of shine right up along the line where the beard comes into the face, because you can imagine it grows out and then starts folding over as the hair grows longer. So we'll try to catch.
Here's a question from Volume 1. Does the matte varnish give good protection for figures that get handled? I paint larger figures with articulation so they get touched more, and I've been looking for a good protective matte sealer.
Yeah, our spray will, right? The Pro Acryl matte aerosol varnish will. It's a heavier solvent. The matte varnish that we are going to be releasing soon, that is an airbrush matte varnish, is not meant to be as much of a protective finish. It will only protect as much as another layer of actual paint would, but it's meant to give you a very good dead finish. So yeah, if you're handling and have, you know, articulation joints like on action figures like you're talking about, then the spray, the can spray, is going to be the one, because it's an acetone base.
I can definitely vouch for it too. I spray it on all my terrain and such as well, which gets thrown into bins, and it really helps.
Yep.
Ghost Hunter, day 1 of asking for hot pink to be added to the paint range. Day one. Oh, boy.
Take magenta, put some red transparent, you're done. Hot pink. There. You ask, you shall receive. I just put it in the paint range with paints you already own. That's like the one answer they always hate the most. But I'm lazy and I don't want to mix.
But we just told you that our paint's the best to mix, chat.
Yeah, kudos to Peru for showing up and wanting to mix the paint. That's when your colors become that much more powerful, is when you realize just how flexible every color in your arsenal is when you can mix however you like.
Darkest Max, what do you recommend as an additive or medium to take with the starter pack to have all the options and the continued learning as a painter? I am a novice who wants to learn. That's a great question too.
Really all you need as a medium is our glaze wash medium. I think that gets you a lot of functionality out of the paint because now you can thin it and learn things like glazing, right? You can, like it says in the name, you can turn your paints into washes if you want as you start getting a little bit more technical with your painting and want to do more filters, then that's always great. But yeah, that would really be it. You don't need a whole lot. You can thin our paints with just water, so you're never really at a loss for, needing anything specific to paint a certain way. If you want to airbrush and learn airbrushing, you can do that just as simply with water and a little bit of the glaze wash medium as any specific airbrush deal. You don't have to go crazy. Pick a couple of hairs out on the other side to give a little shine to, just to bring some texture back into it. Now, eyebrows I need to do too. And that's a tough one. Because he doesn't really have well sculpted eyebrows.
They're on there.
They're like
right?
pencil thin.
I see it. They're very thin.
They're pencil thin because you have the furrowed brow, and this one's actually a little thicker. This one over here doesn't exist as much, but I think we can get that.
Question from Lumberjack Tim: is the airbrush matte varnish going to be something I can mix into these good colors? Oh, gloss. Okay, I'm sorry. Let me repeat that. Is the airbrush gloss varnish going to be something I'll be able to mix into those good colors?
Into what good colors?
Yeah, what colors?
The gloss already exists, and you can mix it as a medium into anything you want to make them more satin. Because our paints, the normal line is ultra matte, and if you want to have it have a little bit more sheen, then you can mix our current gloss varnish. It exists. You can pick that up and you can mix it into the paints how you want. It's a medium. A varnish is a medium, so you can use it, as an acrylic mixing agent to add more shine to your paint. And sometimes that's better than doing the gloss varnish over the top of a color, because the gloss varnish by itself is like super shiny.
Oh,
right?
Okay.
So being able to mix it in with the paints having the matte of the paint and the gloss of the varnish mixed together gives you interim levels of eggshell to satin to full gloss.
Matte varnish into gloss colors is Lumberjack Tim is saying.
What's that?
He's saying matte varnish into gloss colors.
Gloss cookies.
And then he said,
I wouldn't eat gloss cookies.
he said,
you can use the glaze wash medium, although the matting agent in the glaze wash medium is not as strong as the matte varnish will be, but you can put the matte varnish into gloss colors to tone them down. Will you ever get ultra matte out of them? Probably not. Overtaking the gloss with a matte varnish is going to dilute the paint to a point where you lose vibrancy before you hit ultra matte. So you're not going to turn that way to mix them. What you would do in that case is you would paint the gloss color and then matte it with the matte varnish over the top. Don't worry about mixing it, right? Because you'll dilute the color as you do that, right? Because the medium is clear. So you put a clear into a color and you're going to dilute the color. So that might make it harder to paint with. So paint the gloss on and then paint the matte varnish over the top of that to matte it down and make it a two-step process visually like that. You'll have to deal with the gloss as you lay the color down.
Orc Pride, 95 months.
Orc Pride, what's going on, man? Thank you.
That's awesome. 95 months?
Yeah, it's crazy, right?
Whew.
Absolutely crazy. All right, I need dark golden brown, which is around here someplace.
Jared Tetlow's asking, what brush are you using?
That's what we started his hair with.
What brush are you using, Jason?
Huh?
What brush are you using?
I'm using the number 4.
4, okay.
Yeah, these are the old samples that we made of the current Pro Synthetics. I found a package of them when Chris cleaned up the studio. So it's a Pro Synthetic number 4. I've been using the 4 and the 6 on this model exclusively. I have a 2 here as well, but I haven't broken it out yet.
Swifty Bear, what is your balance suggestion for gloss/wash medium? I.e. 2 parts pigment and X parts medium for wash versus X pigments versus X medium for gloss? So I think, Swifty Bear, you're asking for what's your suggestions on your ratios for gloss and wash medium, is what I'm assuming that means.
The gloss is wholly up to the finish you're looking for. Like 100%. That's all the question about how much of the gloss medium to use is how glossy do you want to make the paint. So I usually start with, again, less is more. You can test it real quick because you'll be able to see fairly fast what the level of shine that you're adding to the paint is. The glaze wash medium, different discussion, right? But same principle is how are you planning to use the paint? The glaze wash medium allows us to turn any color into a filter, right? And controls the viscosity of said color to keep it to be more like paint, less like water. Make sense? Because as we thin paint with water, we cause all sorts of problems because the paint starts to skate along the surface of the model more, as water will do. It starts to bead up more before it cures, as water will do. It starts to act more like water. And so if you want to avoid that, then you need to add less water and more medium, because the medium will keep it acting like paint but still dilute it visually, because we always talk about Pro-Acryl not needing to be diluted for viscosity. It only needs to be diluted for opacity. Okay, 2 totally different forms of dilution. And when you dilute with water, you get both. Water spreads the pigment in the paint, right, by adding more liquid in between each particle, which then lowers the opacity, right? You can imagine that if all of my pigments are very close together and overlapping in the paint, I get full opacity, or close to it, right? Depending on how much pigmentation is in the paint. Because the pigments are stacked on top of one another in the paint. They're very dense. When I spread it out, they stay overlapping, and that creates, pigment over pigment. I get full color. As we start putting more fluid, whether it be medium or water, into the paint, the pigment starts to float and separate from itself. And even a small crack in between the pigment spacing will make it show the color beneath it, and that lowers the opacity, right? So the more fluid you add, water or medium, the further the pigment spread, the less opacity the paint has. The problem is that if you use water to do that, right, you're lowering viscosity while lowering opacity. And viscosity is how fluid the paint is. The more it starts to run around, the harder it is to control. You've all done it. We've all put too much water and thinned it way too much, gone and painted on the model, and that color runs into a crack we didn't want it in, right? It goes into the panel line in between the armor plates, and you're like, that's supposed to be dark, and now I just got my bright color flowing like water in that dark crack, and you're trying to fish it out, right? Or repainting the crack. And that's a pain in the butt. That's why I use my thumb palette to wick a lot of the moisture off of my brush, so that when I touch the model, I don't have all that wet, low viscosity, watery material touching the model. The medium, right, keeps the paint thicker, like you expect paint to be, but does the opacity dilution part of it. So back to the question of how much do I put in? I typically start about, 6 or 8 to 1 for the way I use the glaze wash medium, so that I lower the opacity way down, and then I build it back up, right? But you could go less. You could go 1-to-1 glaze wash medium to paint, and it won't lower the opacity as much, but you might be able to do what you're trying to do in one coat, right? Because you're just trying to get a little bit of color showing through. I typically over-thin. I teach people to kind of over-thin on the first coat that you do with a color, so that you don't get an oops moment, right? Because if I'm going to glaze yellow over the top of, say, this skin, go back to the model. If I were going to glaze a thin glaze of yellow on the forehead to give it the feeling like he's in sunlight, let's say, my biggest oops would be if I don't thin it enough and I paint it and now he's jaundiced yellow forehead, right? Because the only way to repair that is to repaint the flesh over the top of it, starting from like the base color. So that's a pain. If I thin it way down, then my biggest oops is when I paint it on there, I don't see it at all. right? And then I add a little bit more color, and I add a little bit more color until I can see it. And maybe I only see it a little bit because it's still so low opacity, but then I can layer it up. And then I'm in control the whole time. I'm a control freak when it comes to painting. I want to make sure I put the color on there. Don't see very much. Yeah, that looks like the right spot. Then put more color on there and broaden it up and broaden it up and broaden it up. And I can do that in like 2 or 3 layers and get exactly what I want. But I start by over thinning. So like I said, I'm usually like 5, 6, 7, 8 to 1 medium to paint. And then try that. And then see if that's enough color for you. And if not, add another drop of paint. Add another drop of paint until it gets where you want. And do that every time. And eventually you'll discover how many drops of paint to your medium equals the outcome you're looking for. And the outcome will change based on what you're painting. You know, glazing a bright highlight on skin, you'll start more timid, more dilution, right? Because you don't want to mess up the nice skin you've done. You know, glazing a highlight on armor, maybe you aren't as careful with it because you get good at it. It makes sense. You want that contrast on non-metallic metal or whatever you're painting. So,
Scientologists, welcome in.
Hello.
70 months. Woo.
Hello.
Scientologist, first sub of 2025. I'm back.
What is going on, man? Good to see you.
That's
Welcome
awesome.
back.
70 months. Nice.
Welcome back.
Going back up here, Dusty Hobbies. Yeah, I agree. This is only my second stream, and I feel like I've learned loads from each one. I have almost 2 decades in the hobby now, and I'm super amazed at the sheer amount of stuff I learned from the team at Monument. Awesome. We'd love to hear that.
Awesome. Yeah, I love sharing it. If anything we do around here helps you find a light bulb that goes off for your painting journey, inspires you to try something new, we win. It's a win.
Yeah, we're
I
definitely.
want to super zoom in on this so people can see what I'm doing, because this eyebrow stuff is going to be like unnecessarily invisible. Okay. You can see how I've done the eyebrow on that one eye.
Those were sculpted, correct?
Yeah. There's a little bit of a line. I can't. You won't see it, right?
Yeah, right. Okay.
What I've done is I've just kind of painted it at the edge of where the eyelid pops out there.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's giving me what I want. It looks good. So this time I've painted the dark golden brown across the whole length of it there in kind of a swipe, you can see, right? But for this brighter color, I want to get that chisel tip, and I want to start doing, you know, little perpendicular pulls of color along there so that I can create the texture of an actual eyebrow. If I just paint a solid line, it doesn't look like it has any texture to it, right? Mm-hmm. But by pulling little bitty tiny marks, now you can see that it's pretending it's hair on there, right?
Camo, I heard earlier in the stream you use 2, 4, and 6 size brushes. Any advantages for larger? I mostly paint larger models, like the size or larger.
Yeah, well, obviously the larger your brush goes, the bigger surface area you can cover with a big heavy brush stroke. So if I'm painting tanks, the 6 is as big as we make. But you might buy yourself like a large flat brush or something to put that paint on for sure. You can go way bigger, right? For what the scale that I normally paint, tanks, I'm airbrushing base coats, and I'm really airbrushing all the way up to my details on tanks and vehicles because I've done that for so many decades. So I come from like military scale modeling where I've painted 1 billion Shermans and German Tigers and things like that. And so in painting tanks, I've learned how to use the airbrush for initial detail work on larger vehicles. And then really your only brush work is edge detailing, rivets, chipping, all the fine detail work. But for the big stuff, I can use a brush. We've shown you how to paint. I don't have it here in the studio, but we've shown you how to paint using the dome dry brushes to paint vehicles. So yeah, but they all are larger brushes when we go that way. So yeah, don't feel bad. You don't have to have when beginning to paint miniatures, a lot of people will feel like they need the smallest brush possible because they look at the details on this model they're holding and they're like, oh my God, that's amazingly small. I need a tiny brush. Makes sense. That literally is a 1-to-1 logical conclusion, right? You couldn't fault anybody for thinking that. I'm painting, a belt buckle that's the size of a pinhead. I need a brush the size of a pinhead, when in reality what you need is a larger brush that has a really good point, so that the larger brush holds enough paint so that from the time you go from your paint palette to the model, the paint's still wet. Because the smaller brush you get, by the time you dip it into acrylic paint, come over here, line up, get aimed in, and go to touch that little bitty brush to that little bitty spot. The paint on the brush is already dry because there wasn't enough liquid in that little bitty brush, and it already cured or got to the point to where it won't flow off the brush by the time you get over here. The most frustrating thing for people, especially when they go to like make an eyeball, and they take that little bitty brush, and you get in the paint, and you feel like it's just the right amount, and you get over there, and you steady your hand, and you line it up, and you go, doot, and nothing happens because the tip of the brush is already dry. So a bigger brush prevents that from happening because there's too much liquid in the body of the brush to dry on the way to the model. And you want a nice point so you can still line it up, take your time, stick your tongue out, stand upright, get your balance, and doot, and then you get color. So that's why I paint generally with 2s, 4s, and 6s. For all the models I do. Like, this model was painted with a 2 and a 4. Nothing smaller than a 2 or a 4. For most of my wargaming scale models. There's just really no need. The only time I will go smaller is if I had like a detail I was trying to get that was like nestled in between like an underarm or up where the backpack attached to the body that I forgot, and I just can't get a bigger brush in there without bouncing it off the walls. So I got to play operation. I got to go in there and get the leg bone without making the nose light up. Then I'll use a smaller brush just sheerly for the diameter and the ability to get it into a tight spot.
Welcome in, everybody, for just tuning in. If you have any questions, please sure to tag us, and I will get to them.
Hello.
Started with the hair today.
I think a couple little more doots, and we're talking T90 doots, if you can pop in again.
Yep.
T90 doots. Oh, gosh. Speaking of drying out, I've been yapping so long that my bright pale yellow is all dried out completely.
We're real zoomed in on this one.
All right. So go back and get the bright pale yellow working here, and we want to just do the same thing. Chisel tip, right? So it's flat this way and super sharp this way, right? I'm looking at the flat side so that my sharp edge is hitting the brush, and now I can go in and, again, just grab a couple of those little bitty eyebrow hair spots where I want to make sure it's brighter to match the way my shine is falling on the hair on the rest of the model, which is all over on this side here. So like so. And then over on this one, I'll want to catch just a little bit of shine right here at the beginning of the eyebrow before it dives off into the side of the face that goes into shadow. So I can catch just a couple of these spots here.
Cam was asking, have you all any clear coats to seal the paint in or nah? I'm always so nervous I'm going to scratch off a paint layer.
Yeah. The nice thing is that the paint is really strong once it's cured. And if you're another reason to not paint with too many thin layers, right? Like if you build your paint up with 15 thin layers, you never really have a single solid layer of paint. So people that glaze a tremendous amount of color to get their paint done, those will be less protected by the paint itself, because as you dilute the paint, the polyurethane, the acrylic that makes it plastic when it dries, in layman's terms, is much thinner and isn't as strong. So that we built Pro-Acryl so that you can feel more comfortable painting with heavier layers, and they still blend really well because you're also getting the full bodied acrylic at the end, so that when it cures, it's stronger. Like I don't use a varnish on many of my models, but we do make it. Our spray, right? So our clear spray. I'm not going to grab that bottle because it's behind the Guardian there, but we have our spray cans, 500 ml spray cans. Made in concert with the Color Forge. Dead matte, awesome spray. It's an aerosol. It's an acetone-based acrylic. Very heavy duty. To give you an idea, the acetone-based acrylics are a formulation that they use in like road striping. Mm-hmm. Right? That's really where you find acetone-based paints, is in that kind of world where the acrylic needs to hold up under sun and traffic and things like that, but is also easy to use and does the detail you need. And so that's the basis for it. And so, yeah, that matte varnish is fantastic to use, and it gives you a fairly good protective coat. And you can put multiple coats on if you need.
Deputy Creepy, Howdy, Monument. I hope you're all doing well. I'm officially a deputy, Mr. Jason.
Creepy's in the fantastic. You made it.
Nice.
He's been doing that and wanting to do that for years.
I remember that. That's super cool.
Congrats, Creepy. Need to give him one weirdly long eyebrow hair that appears in the morning, like mine. Every now and then, like right in the middle, the peak of my eyebrows. It wasn't there yesterday, and then there'll be like a gray one that goes. Whoop.
Oh, I get some pretty gnarly ones.
I have some weird satisfaction from yanking it out, like bap, and then like crying. I don't know what it is. It's like picking nose hairs, right? All right, so now we have eyebrows. That works.
That works great.
I'm happy. You're happy. We're all happy. All right. So yeah, poke back out. Now we can see that I don't think I need to do much work to the face at all.
The face looks great. If y'all wanted to see the workup yesterday, he brightened up the face, and you could really tell a difference with just the little that he did to it. Volume 1, I'm ordering brushes in the matte varnish later. Nice. Deputy. Oh, yeah, I've been a deputy for 6 months on my own at this point. I've been on the road for almost a year, though.
What?
Oh, man.
Well, congrats. That's awesome.
That is cool.
All right, I'm pretty happy with the face. I might make some alterations. Believe it or not, this is still pretty quick work. You know, we've done, if you go back and look at the video that Chris put together on painting the face, that's literally, other than what we did yesterday for the highlights, it's 4 colors.
Yeah.
It's super simple. Everything we've done here, I think, has been 4 colors or less.
Just about.
Right?
Just about.
I think that probably the most colors were used on the cloak just to get the kind of weird emerald shadow and playing around. I was kind of treating it like finger painting as we did it yesterday, just slopping colors on. It was all easy, even though it used more colors than everything else.
Caldus, how much time would you say y'all put into this model, like actual paint time? Well, let's do that math, right?
If we think about it, it's probably no more than an hour and a half a day for
since the 6th.
10 days.
Just about. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Because I missed 2 of those.
Yeah, just about.
10 days. After today, it'll be 10 days.
Yep.
Right? At an hour and a half. So what is that? 10, 15 hours so far? Sounds about right.
Yeah.
Feels about right.
You also will pause during stream and you'll stop.
Well, that's why I say it's only about an hour and a half. Because I think probably 30 minutes I spend focused on other things on average.
Yeah.
You know, helping people with questions in chat. Doing things like this, like showing and you know, talking about what we've done as opposed to just painting. If I were here painting by myself in the studio on a weekend, it would go much quicker. You know, I would say this is I could get probably all of this done in 8 to 10 hours tops, painting on my own with some music on.
Swifty, if you have a question about brushes, remind me. I got a bunch of questions coming in. Voldemort, I'm using AI when I'm painting miniatures. I'm uploading an image of a miniature I want to paint, and then the AI is telling me every single paint the artist used to paint this. After that, it's telling me how to do it.
Good luck with that.
After that is telling me how to do it. Oh, wow. That's pretty crazy. I'm curious on which that, like, how that's almost impossible, I would think.
Benefit of experience. Yeah. Time, that's all it is. You know, when you know, and that's one of the things that I'm not a big fan of in the hobby right now with a lot of influencers that are telling you paint your army in 15 minutes. Because they can do it. They've been painting for a decade. And they can show you anything. I can show you all this and tell you that I painted this in 15 hours. I would never say you should be able to do this in 15 hours, right? Because a lot of it comes down to what I call analysis paralysis, and we all fall victim to it, right? Is that I'll look at a thing like this and I'll say, okay, I know I listened to him say the way he wants to do it, but I need to find what's comfortable for me. So what somebody says is 10 minutes might take me, hell, it might take me 10 hours to get over the hump. Do it, mess it up, do it again, do it again, do it again. And while you're learning and finding that confidence, don't worry about time. That's the one thing I will tell you. Stop paying attention to how to do things fast. Do things that feel comfortable. If you want to learn how to paint fast, then contrast paints and speed paints will get you there really quick. Doing glazes and underpainting and all that can get you there quick. There's a lot of methods out there that can do that. But if you're focused on quality and speed, that's practice, right? Quality and speed don't come from any product. right? They don't come from any tutorial. They come from experience and confidence on your part. And how long that takes is up to you, right? As we all know, like some people just learn it and piss you off. You're like, good gosh, that guy tried it and on his second attempt, he nailed it. And it's taken me 100 times. That's just, we all get it in different ways. You'll have something you learn quicker than somebody else, and they'll have something they learn quicker than you. So that's kind of like asking how long's a piece of string. So I never worry about how fast it is.
D-Fresh, could Jason show an example of how he thins the pale yellow he is using? I use Jason's process with a dry palette, but always seem to struggle with the bright colors.
Are you putting how dark of a color are you putting your bright colors over? Right? Because 99.999999% of the time, the issue with thinning bright colors is that you're trying to put them over too dark of a color, right? And we talk about this a lot because what happens is that all of your colors are having the same problem. The darker colors that you're thinning and putting over the top of other colors aren't creating as much contrast, so they're not showing you the same problem that the bright color is, even though that same problem exists, okay? And that same problem can exist for any thin paint, right? If you're over diluting it and it's running around. So yeah, I'll show you. Let me put out some more of the bright pale yellow because it dried up on the... I'm using bright pale yellow, but when I put it on the palette, do it like everything else. I'm just using palette paper right now too. I've got an ugly, dirty piece of glass underneath it. They look almost the same now.
Well, Malev, thank you so much. Mine, your paints are sick. I like them a lot.
2 years of not cleaning my palette. Thank you. Malev is like, I like them a lot. Have a good day, everyone. I'm out. What's going on, Malev? The key with thinning is, so I've got some color on my thumb palette here, right? Let me pull so I can, it's a bit easier for me to just pull it over here so that we don't have to have it both on screen at the same time, right? So here's my clump of bright pale yellow, right? And here's my thumb palette. So whenever I'm painting thinly, right, I'll get a bigger brush, my number 6, right? So I'll just simply take my, make sure I don't put that in paint, right? I'll take my water cup and, I'll rinse my brush out from the last, paint I was using. And then I take it straight out. I don't ever wick my brush on the side of the cup. Never. Like literally never. I always rinse it, lift it out of the water. Okay, so now it has however much water it can hold. And then I have off to the side of that, I have a paper towel. And I'll take on my paper towel, and right now you see how shiny that is? That's nothing but water, right? As much water as that brush will hold. And then over here on the side, I'll wipe off the brush however many times. 2 swipes on the paper towel, and it's still going to have enough wetness in there. See that shine? Still has enough wetness in there that I can make my paint fairly thin, but not really like glaze thin. So if we're talking about glazing, I would get all the water in the brush, right? Again, so I put it back in the water. Now it's got all the water again. If I touch it to my fingernail, I get a droplet of water, right? So it's full. It won't even take that droplet back. It's so full, right? Then I'll come over here to the pale yellow, and I'll just touch the edge of the pale yellow and pull it out. And now I have this glaze, right? This paint that I can glaze with. It's like milk, like thin milk, right? And that's what gives everybody a problem, is because they're like, oh, that's great. Jason showed me that. I have that. That's awesome. Can we pop in?
Mm-hmm.
Right? So now I've got a brush loaded with that very thin pale yellow. And the problem is, if I take this and touch a model with it, right, let's get that water off my thumbnail, right? I'm going to have a big droplet of paint. Look at that big droplet of paint, right? Like that will run. Look at that, right? So that's too much paint. What do you do with that on the surface? So you start spreading it around to get it to act right, and see how it keeps becoming a droplet again and pushing itself back where it wants to go. I want that paint to go a different direction, but I have so much liquid on there. Look, it's running backwards, right? I can't control where that goes. There's too much wetness. So now I'm trying to, oh my gosh, what am I doing? And now I'm trying to paint this area with this glaze like Jason showed me, and I got the paint the right thinness, but holy crap, that looks horrible. And you can imagine when that dries what that's going to look like. It's going to look like a cloudy mess, right? Like a complete cloudy mess, because all the pigment's running with gravity to the wrong place. It's splotchy up here. That's what the thumb palette is for. So now the thumb palette, I come over with that same amount of wet paint, and I get rid of most of it. I just take it off over here. It lets me see, like, okay, is that the right the thinness? Oh, yeah, that's great. I'm being able to see color through it. That's great. But now I get most of it gone to where now there's not hardly any. And then when I come over and I'm using it, now it doesn't spread around. It isn't as impactful. There's not as much color to it, but it also doesn't drip around everywhere, right? And so then I'll go back over and grab some more. Right? Now I'm loaded up again. Then I come back over here and take it off a second time, so I don't have all that material. And then I go right back over that last layer until I start building up enough. And you'll see that now, well, it's hard on my fingernail with such a bright color, but you'll start seeing that the color's happening there, right? As opposed to this chalky mess. Like, that's a chalky mess. This is what everybody complains about when glazing. And we have to answer a bunch of customer service questions about that, because they're like, when I glaze with your ivory or glaze with your whatever, it stains. It has, you know, there's more pigment around the edges, like a coffee stain, this big drop. It's cloudy. It has all this nonsense, see? And that's because you went with too much material on the model. No matter how long you've been painting, I see painters that have been painting for decades do this same thing, right? This same thing. They don't wick any of that material off the brush, right? So you've got all this very wet, diluted paint, and then you try to paint with it, and you complain because at the end of the day, it's hard to control. And it's like all because you got too much liquid on there, right? It's the right color. It's the right thinness. It's just too much liquid. It's hard. It's going to show brush strokes every time. It's going to get chalky and textured. So get rid of most of it on a paper towel or on here. And then when you use it, you know, now you've got very controlled ability to put the paint on. And that's what I'm doing here. You know, that's what lets me come in and use this bright pale yellow like it is on my brush right now, and I'll glaze it right over the top of that shine spot on the model. And if it's not bright enough and doesn't have the effect I want, I go get more. Right? Now I got more. Then I take it off on my thumb palette again, and then come back over here and glaze over that again until it gets to the point where I'm happy with the brightness. And by doing that in small steps, you'll get more effect. It won't be immediate. It takes patience. But this is the way to reach the promised land, so to speak, with glazing bright colors. Number one, don't glaze them over colors that are too dark, because you'll see all that contrast. It'll create all sorts of headaches for you, right? Glaze them over colors that are more bright. So basically build a foundation of color underneath your bright colors that allows them to stand out and add to the brightness, but not be something that, you know, ultimately is trying to fight. Like, I wouldn't glaze this pale yellow over this dark area down here. It would look completely different than the pale yellow done over the yellows and oranges. Give me a totally different color, not have the effect I want. So that's why you'll see me build up all of my color from dark to light and go through all those mid-tone stages before I try to glaze a bright color on. You're much better off glazing a bright color over a not so bright version of itself. So if I were doing pale yellow, I'm much safer glazing pale yellow over something like this, you know, lighter ochre, than I am trying to glaze it over the base that I used of warm brown, right? These two colors, when I mix them together, are nothing like these two colors when I mix them together, right? So you got to be careful with that, because you're going to see more contrast. The brightness and the darkness as you glaze over them are going to be very different. On yesterday's show, we talked about this and said that you can glaze the darker color over the brighter color much easier than the bright color over the dark. So always build up to a mid-tone or brighter color before you glaze something like white or ivory or pale yellow. That should help a lot.
All right. So Swifty Bear has two questions, two-parter. Have a lot of issues with my current synthetic edges and points splitting and twisting. Any suggestions? And then the second one is, I bought a box of sables from you at Gen Con, but I'm concerned about them getting ruined similarly. How do I prevent this?
So here is, let me grab a brush that I've been using for a long time. Here, this brush I've been using for 18 months, right? So I get it wet. And I don't, as I go through and test, this is a test brush for a new line of synthetics that we're bringing out that are more affordable, beginner brushes. So I don't expect as much from it, but you can see it still holds a really sharp point. Now, I have not cleaned it, so it has a bunch of paint in the ferrule. You can see all that dark line around the ferrule. What happens and why tips split is because there's too much paint built up right here, where the metal and the hair comes together. Paint gets in there and it constricts, and watch what happens if I apply pressure here, which is what happens. It constricts all that. As I do that, look, see what happens? Now that's obviously exaggerated, but if your tips are doing that, it's because there's too much paint built up down here and it's causing the hair to tighten up, right? And pulling it together, and that won't form a point because it's fighting that tension. So you need to clean the brush, right? You need to do a deep cleaning with like our Gentastics Drunken Brush Group will like literally siphon paint out of the ferrule, right? We built it specific. It's handmade by the co-owner of the company, Jen, over in the kitchen on the other side of our HQ. Like, no joke, right? So we take great pride in our soap. That'll help, right? Now, I don't know what you meant by, it said it didn't say curling. It said splitting and twisting. So I don't understand twisting. If by twist you mean curl, like the tip
like
curls
the hook
over
or something.
Because synthetics will always get a little bit of tip curl, but so will sables over time too, right?
But then you can watch that video and you can just get the point back too.
Like I said, this is a brush that I've been using for 18 months and painted a bajillion models with, and the point is still good. But that chase the tip story that I told you early in the stream, you may not have been here for it. Whenever you're going to be painting with a brush, believe it or not, people will subconsciously always hold the brush in the same manner. Let me get a brush here that has some lettering on it, right? So here's one of our Pro Synthetics. And you will subconsciously, and most people, believe it or not, will hold it to where the lettering is up, facing them, right? Or away from them where they can't see it at all. It's just a thing in your brain. Don't know why. You probably don't think about it at all, but you probably pick up your brush and rotate it until you can see the lettering. You don't just willy-nilly pick it up and paint with it however it is. A lot of people will rotate it around until they get to that spot, which subconsciously makes them comfortable, whatever. And then you'll continually paint with it like that. Well, if you continually paint with a brush in the same direction, right, it starts to inherit that bend, right? It's like if you bend your credit card a million times as a fidget device, eventually it breaks and snaps in half and creates a deal where it won't go flat. It's always in a bent spot, right? Same thing with a synthetic brush, because a synthetic brush is really just plastic filament. Nylons, polyesters, right? So various forms of plastic and a filament. And so what you do instead is, like I was showing before, right? You flatten the brush out one direction, right? So see, that's not much of a point, but when you rotate it 90 degrees, you have the sharpest point you'll ever see because you've created a chisel, right? And then you paint all of your fine lines here, right? So let me get some paint. I don't have any dark colors out, do I? I would just go with a bright white, right? So we'll go with this color, right? So I've got this chisel tip. I'll form it here, right? So now it's flat and sharp. So then I can come over here and I can pull really nice thin detail lines, or I can turn the chisel over and do thick lines, right? But then I can do thin, I can do thick, thin, thick, all with the same brush pressure because it's sharp one direction and flat the other. And then as you paint with the sharp edge, if you're doing detailing, eventually that sharp edge starts to flatten out. I'll use a lot of pressure here, right? That flat edge sharpens or flattens out. The sharp edge flattens out. And then I rotate it 90 degrees and I have my point back, right? It's hard to see, but there I have my point back, right? And now I get back to being able to paint thin lines. And what that's also doing is it's creating a situation where you're constantly rotating your brush 90 degrees to chase the tip, right? Chase the tip that you need. Whether you need the flat tip or the sharp tip, you're always chasing after it because it's always spreading and narrowing as you paint. And so you keep turning the brush. And by turning the brush all the time, it never learns which direction to curl. So I only use synthetic brushes. Jordan, who paints on our stream too, our other studio artist, only uses sables, right? So there's no right or wrong. I enjoy synthetics because they have more snap, right? I can have a heavy hand with them. I can smack the model with it and it immediately goes spring back to being straight. So I'm ready to smack it again with the brush, right? That sounds very masochistic, but
Voldemort sucks. What set of colors from your collection creates the best female skin tones using airbrush?
What kind of female? Orc? Alien?
Voldemort kept saying, I think female skin tone is more pinky.
No, absolutely not. Females have less of an intrusion of color due to hair follicles. It tends to be like they don't get 5 o'clock shadow as generally. They don't have as intense shadow from bone structure generally. They have a little bit of a softer curve to them, which is going to eliminate a little bit of the hard shading that a male body might have. But there are female models that you'll find that are like barbarian females that would have all that chiseled muscular nature back to them. But no, you can't separate by gender or anything out what a skin tone looks like. You can start looking at geographical skin tones and start narrowing them down. Central America, South America, Northern Africa, Southern Africa, the Asias all have their stuff, and you might find that I get a little bit more of a greenish yellow skin tone on some, a little bit more of a brownish red, a little bit more of a pinkish. So you can choose, right? You can do whatever you like. There is no overarching right or wrong. If you're talking about Caucasian flesh, if you go back and watch my underpainting video here, it'll show you the kind of colors that can give you like a more natural skin tone like what we've got going on him. This coloring would work well for a female too. You probably wouldn't use as much purple because the purple I use on his face is to reflect the kind of 5 o'clock shadow, right, along the beard line, whereas a female wouldn't have that, right? Like I said, the intensity of shadow as you draw down to the jawline doesn't exist for females because they don't have a lot of hair follicles in the skin there, and those hair follicles, they don't have to shave their face, right? The little pinpricks of hair that come out from 5 o'clock shadow are what are adding color to the skin there, as well as shadow under the cheek line and such. So they would be more flush, larger, so you'd have the red extend down into the cheek, and then it's just back to probably some of the yellow-green and the skin tone, and then just natural shading, darker skin tones towards the bottom, right? So I wouldn't go with as much of the purple as I did here. So if I were painting, like if somebody had put a model in front of me, unfortunately the only female model I have here is jade colored. So, so that's not true. I have another one. I have a Shinobi, but like this, right? This would give you an idea of how I attack female skin tones as I have much smoother transitions of color. Forget the color. Obviously the color in kind of the jade or seafoam greens is not the right color for Caucasian skin. But the principle is the same. Softer blends. There's smoother curvatures to the skin, so there's not as chiseled definition between shadow and highlight as I might do on a male. So I give smoother blends on female skin. I look for that because it makes it feel softer to the eye. And that's the way I want the skin to feel on most of the female subjects that I paint, as opposed to the grizzled 5 o'clock shadow beards and all that stuff that we do on men. A little bit more chiseled. So this is a good way to show the smoother blending that I do, like from the thigh down to the leg. There's no, harsh jump to shadow anywhere on her until we get down to like the lower extremities where it's all, supposed to be in shadow anyway, right? So smoothness of blends is a big key. Then when you're picking your colors, right, the Shinobi is a good example again with she's got like growth and stuff on her, but this skin is not dissimilar to the way we've done the lion, right? Except that I use shadow flesh here on Shinobi. Shadow and tan, right? So using shadow flesh as a base gives a little bit more of a reddish pinkishness to it. Right? Because the advanced flesh tone is more of a golden yellow base. You can see that when I hold them together. More red on the left in the shadow flesh. So that gets that pinkishness you're thinking. So I did shadow flesh as a base and then tan flesh over the top of that and mixed together, right? Which gives me that pale color. So this is really all of her skin is done primarily with these. There's a green shadow to it as well because I'm doing this kind of infested, I forget what they're called. The Oni, the demons that, can infest. She's got a demon infested arm. Her sword arm is taken over by a demon, is the story I told on this one. So I've got all the veining done there, which kind of throws off the skin tone. But, these are the two colors that I used. And shadow flesh and tan flesh mixed in various ways will give you a very broad range of skin tone that you can use. And then you can choose to use a little bit of warm flesh or dark warm flesh that has a little bit more yellow to it to hit like the forehead, the top of the nose, things like that will bring sunlight into this spectrum because these colors don't feel like they're outside necessarily. So a little bit of yellow with the warm fleshes as a highlight helps a lot with bringing them into an environment, a warmer environment, if that's what you're looking for. Hopefully that helps. 5. No, unfortunately not. Who? Okay, all right. Saw a video on YouTube where the guy painted the skin with a base skin tone, then started tapping the figure with a sponge using transparent yellow, blue, and red.
Interesting.
You can definitely do that. You can definitely do that to kind of, it's got to be a big model, right? Like bigger than this. That'd be like the Sideshow Collectibles channel or something where they paint things that are in larger, you know, the face might be 2 or 3 inches tall for the larger, like 1/6 scale Sideshow stuff. I've seen them do it. Yeah, the Sideshow, it was probably the Sideshow channel. They have some great painters there that can do and get away with a lot more. But yeah, you can do that. You can do base skin tones and then tap transparents on it to add the coloring. You know, the same thing we do with underpainting a lot in the acrylic world can be done by glazing overtones. You know, paint it just flesh and then change the color by glazing skin tones back over it for sure. A lot of it comes down to size of the space you're painting in. You know, you just don't have the opportunity all the time to work those techniques into a small area. You know, like you wouldn't sponge stipple color onto a face like this. You just wouldn't get away with it. It would look very stark and clown paint style. Feel like you should be taking more of that in for your Daughters of Cain. Oh, yeah, definitely. Lots of the opportunity to do like even more pale flesh tones and things like that, which would be really cool. Here we sponge paint only mechs. We do a lot of that. Yeah, sponging for me really comes down to doing things like weathering and chipping and detail work and things of that nature. I don't use them for much else. Just because of size of model, scale that we're working at, like I said, it becomes very difficult to pull some of that stuff off. All right.
Volt, resubscribe for 10 months. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really appreciate that.
I keep putting something off.
What's that?
These damn suspender garter belt things on the side there. And he's got like little gold skull emblems that attach him to the armor that probably want to be gold. So I need to figure that stuff out.
Are they gold?
The skulls will be.
The skulls will be.
Right. And this stuff on his armband I thought was like a leather cuff. It's not. It's like inlaid little emblems, like little...
rivet gold pieces?
They're not rivets. They're like little squares and rectangles, like if he had, you know, medals. Oh. Like gold medals that are just plated in the indention there.
Interesting.
They're not even runes. They're just like literally they're medals. Like if you had all his accolades in medals instead of on your chest, they're all along without ribbons. They're all just along the wrist. So I have to paint all those gold too. So paying attention along the line of this journey might have helped me a lot. Instead, I didn't, and now I'm stuck having to figure out what colors I want to use now that I've already painted all my gold. But
that's the bits part of the title today.
Yeah, that's the and stuff.
And stuff.
The and stuff and things. So let's get some dark warm gray. Because we need to paint the suspendery things.
Is there any green on this guy?
Green?
Yeah.
There's the green that I brought into the shadows on the gold. No, I'm sorry.
Like
all the gold is done with dark yellow green as a base, and then the emerald.
His cloak wasn't there some green you were gonna put on them?
No.
Like okay.
Nope. No green.
Oh, I think it was your last lion you painted had green though.
Green, yeah.
Okay, that's where I was getting at.
Yeah, he had a green cloak.
Green cloak, got it. But that's not that's not this though.
No, we're doing this guy like the 30K version of the lion. So obviously the sculpt is not an official GW sculpt, so he doesn't have all of the actual sameness that we would want to pull that off, but it's close enough. Like these things are shown on the lion here. You can see that he has the what do you call that? The robe.
That's the older one, though.
Yeah, the
white.
The white robe on him. Right. I did this guy's armor like my 30K Dark Angels, where I did a little bit of green black on the armor. There's a lot of transparent black and transparent green done over the grays to get me this kind of deep green. I'm doing the traditional black that the Dark Angels were on this. I chose to paint my 30K army a little bit more green, right? Yeah. But he has that white cloak, and you can see like the robe comes up over the shoulders and lets the chest plate show through. And so that's kind of what I'm doing here, although it doesn't have the same detailing to it.
Voldemort, do you have a specific line only for airbrush? I've been told that using non-airbrush paints with thinners or flow improvers mixed with regular paints does the same job, but from my experience, those paints break my airbrush because they dry way too fast and I have to deep clean very often.
So to answer the question first, no, I don't make a second line of paints for airbrushing in particular. Reason is that you don't have to use a special line of paints to airbrush. The second part of your question alludes to what can be problematic, which is that you take paints that need to be thinned. Our paints can spray out of the airbrush, which we do quite often on stream here, without any thinning. You need to be fairly confident in your airbrushing skills to make that work 100%, right? Because you with airbrush, here's the thing. It's really going to come down to you understanding that you can't put a whole lot of paint in your airbrush if the paint dries quickly. Liquid acrylic dries pretty quickly. So you never want to fill the cup of your airbrush up too high, right? So if I pull an airbrush over here, right, I never want to fill the airbrush more than maybe about to there. So barely up into the cup. See where the tip of the brush is?
Like not even...
See that line right around there? I would fill it to there. If I put paint up to like the top of the cup or like up to here, a lot of the paint around the top is touching the air. It starts to cure. And as it gets pulled down into the airbrush, the paint sprays fine until this paint that was up at the top gets down in there. It's already starting to get thicker because it's evaporating. And as it goes through the tip, it starts to clog your brush. So your first cup sprays great. And then when you go back and want to spray more, it starts to clog because you've let all this paint that was drying at the top. So put less paint in. Only fill your airbrush down to the almost to the hole where it comes up into the cup. Only fill it there. Spray for a little bit. When you run out, rinse some water through it real quick. Spray it until the water's gone. Then put more paint in it up to that level and spray it again. You will thank yourself, right, and thank me for the tip because, yes, you have to stop and do a little bit of water rinsing real quick more often, but you will not have to deep clean your brush hardly ever. Make sense?
It's a little prevention now.
Yeah, it's preventative maintenance as you go, as opposed to that big problem that comes from liquid acrylics. And that's airbrush paints too. Regardless if they tell you they're made for airbrush, that just means they're pre-thinned. They're still drying just as fast as everybody else's paints, right? So it leads a false sense of security, and people load their airbrush up with airbrush paints. And airbrush paints, because if they're thinned with an incorrect thinner, right, they can dry quicker than the paint without the thinner. So be careful with that. Right? And you can wind up with airbrush paints gumming your airbrush up more so than paints that you had mixed thinner in yourself and just gone and run it with less paint in the brush, rinse it, less paint, rinse it, less paint. Even when painting armies, I know in your brain it's like, God, how much of a freaking bummer is that? I just want to paint. But if you take the time to clean it out, rinse it, then you'll be able to spray the whole time. Yeah, you run water through between refilling, for sure. Don't ever just put more paint. You'll see us bad technique it every now and then when we're on stream because we just want to show you, and I run out of paint. I'm like, just a little bit more purple, and I get it done. But if you're actually in the groove of painting, take the time to stop, rinse a little water through it. You don't have to clean it. You just need to rinse a little water through it and then put your paint back in. Much, much better in the long run for the whole care and maintenance of your brush.
Vault is also asking, what's the difference between airbrush thinner and flow improver? Is there
airbrush thinner is meant to lower the viscosity of the paint so that it goes through the brush without clogging. Right? Viscosity is thickness of the paint. Higher number, heavier it is, more like oil or tar, right? And flow improver is meant to add a little bit of what is really a petroleum-based glycol to it that makes the paint take longer to dry. So flow improver makes the paint a little bit more oily. It makes it slide around on the surface a little bit better and creates a situation where it doesn't cure as fast. All right, so flow improver keeps acrylic paints running through the airbrush for longer because they don't dry up. But you have to be careful because if you put too much flow improver, guess what they don't do at all?
Flow improve?
Dry. You'll wind up, if you're in a humid area and you put too much flow improver in, I usually say just a drop or maybe two of flow improver into the paint once you get it thin. With Pro Acryl, you just need a little touch of water, you know, not even 1 to 1, like 2 drops of paint to 1 drop of water, and then a drop of flow improver maybe. It all depends. You know, you got to try to paint with it in your area, see how you like it, because anything you put in, thinner or otherwise, is going to lower the color intensity of the color you're trying to spray, because you just made it thinner. So I like spraying models without a lot of thinning to the paint at all. And I'll do all my base coats without thinning anything. Our Timberwolf mech that we just did, I spray painted all of the body with 1, 2, 3, 4 colors to build up from dark blue shadow up through dark jade, jade, and bright jade. And I did all that with airbrush with 0 thinning, right? So if you want to super zoom in on that, Chris?
Yeah.
It's going to be tougher to tell because I've done all this intentional chipping. But you can see that the airbrush coat that was on there first was very smooth, right? There was not any spotting on there. I know that the chipping makes it look all completely weathered, but there was no spotting of it even without any thinning. And we're in a super dry climate here in Arizona, right? So you can, when doing just one model, I'm not asking a lot of the airbrush here because this is one model that literally I'm just spraying one color, cleaning the brush, another color, cleaning the brush, another color, you get it until I'm done. And you can not have to thin our paints at all and get that done. That works great. If I were doing an army, I would have to stop and do what I was telling you, and I would thin the paint so that I could spray with that same color for a longer period of time, doing 50 models that I'm base coating as opposed to one. Even a big one like this can be done pretty quick.
Someone was asking, where's Baby J? Baby J is not here today. He was here on last Friday. Him and Jason switch off.
Yep. Right now, time for some warm gray. If you want to punch me back out.
Yep. What colors would you recommend for red non-metallic metal?
Red non-metallic?
Ooh, interesting.
I really like Payne's gray underneath for a shadow layer, so I'd probably do that. That's how my Blood Angels went. I mean, I'd do my Blood Angels colors, right? I would do my Payne's gray into dark plum, into pyro red, the same way I do here, and just go and jump to the pale pink, which is the bright highlight, and be a little bit more aggressive with the pale pink, because you could see very quickly if I just took this pale pink little highlight and I made it bigger and more of a shine stripe on here, this would be non-metallic metal red. I've just opted to do small highlights on it that make it feel like it's a rougher painted metal. It still has a hard surface edge to it. All the edge detailing pops out nicely, but the shine isn't very broad. Right, so it makes it feel like a dull painted metal because I want the non-metallic gold to stand out on this. But the same colors would be used. So Payne's gray, which is a bluish black as the base layer, dark plum, which gets you into a kind of purpley red that works well with the Payne's gray, and then pyro red over that. And I'm mixing them in between stages. So Payne's gray with dark plum with pyro red, and then pale pink over the top of that without any mixing, to give you this stark contrast. Would work really great. You got spoiled with all of us here. Yeah, we are, and Baby J misses the stream, and he will continually be on, but Baby J is also pursuing a new directive and goal in sales, which is a great thing. We, at the end of every year, we go through and talk with everybody and see, how stuff's going, what do they see in their future. I ask everybody in the entire company pretty much, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And, going through in various times during the year and figuring that out, what do you want to be doing? Sometimes I have that conversation with people every day, right? And Baby J wants to try his hand at doing some sales. So that's what we're going to do. but he will never not be part of our stream family. He will pick up the ball and run with it.
Yeah, and sometimes
more than not.
Yeah, and sometimes we'll have people sitting at the desks or the game table. It's just
that was a plan for this model. Unfortunately, we're so slammed still from the holidays that we couldn't afford it. Like that's why Jen's not here. She's out there working in fulfillment right now.
Yeah,
she just poked her head in here a minute ago asking if I could stay if people wanted to work overtime tonight, and I can't, unfortunately. But yeah, we're just slammed. We're trying to get back on track after the holidays, and it's like one step forward, two steps back. We're hiring if you know anybody in the Phoenix area that wants to come and work on our fulfillment team. We also have a marketing graphics design opening if you check the jobs section on our website. We always forget to talk about that on stream, but we do have a careers tab on monumenthobbies.com. There are some careers here right now. You want to move to Phoenix, you got to work from Phoenix, sorry. We have no remote positions available.
Oh, here's a good question. Ever stripped paint from a miniature? If yes, what is the easiest way and what products do you use?
I've only ever done it like a handful of times. It's just not how I do things. I generally just paint over what was already there rather than strip it if I have to at all.
I've tried simple green.
Yeah, simple green is what I've used in the past. You just soak it for a bit and then use, I prefer to use what I call a fingernail scrubber, right? It's a brush that's meant to get dirt out from under your fingernails, so it's fairly soft, but the bristles will get in the tight places and still move dirt. And once you've soaked it a little bit in simple green, take that fingernail scrubber and rub it. It won't, because it's so soft, it won't cause abrasion to the surface of the model. It won't scratch the model up, right? Like other, like if you use the Brillo pad, that'll scratch the plastics and the metal. It'll polish metal, so if it's a metal miniature, it might not be a bad deal. But yeah, that's what I suggest. Well, I think we used bright neutral gray. Some bright
Malev,
neutral gray.
is there fulfillment and warehouse spots as well?
Fulfillment, yeah.
Yep. Simple green, yep, simple green. I've done that for stripping some paint.
Yeah, the fulfillment position is kind of a jack of all trades floater. So you'd be working with the fulfillment team to pick and pull orders, and you would then be trained on running a shipping station and be able to grow within the fulfillment team. You'd be pulling customer and retail and distributor orders as needed.
Zazin, yes, we did lighten up the face. That was yesterday.
Yesterday's stream.
I think it was before or after you did the cloak?
After. I got the cloak done, which is what helped direct me to how bright I wanted the skin to be.
Is simple green what you use on your glass palette?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, you do?
Yes.
I use dish soap on mine, but either way it works.
Well, it's just because that's what we use here for cleaning up a lot of stuff in production.
Yep.
And so we just had a bucket we used to have a bucket in the back. It doesn't exist anymore.
Let it dip in there.
And we'd just go put it in a 5-gallon bucket overnight.
And that's what takes it off?
And that was it. Come in the morning and get a paint scraper and just scrape it off. Super easy. Acetone can work, but I worry about it how it reacts to models. So you might wind up with a real problem of putting it over plastic and having it melt the plastic. So don't take that as a recommendation. I take that back. I didn't say.
Don't do that. We're taking it back.
It can clean paint off of your glass palette though.
If you're all just tuning in, welcome. See more people hopping in.
Hello. Hello. He's got these, like I said, he's got these white cloth things that almost aren't worth painting because you can't even see them really.
Which one? What are you talking about? The
white cloth that I'm painting up in here.
Yeah.
I mean, they're almost invisible. So it's hard to justify even painting them. But they're there. And I would never forgive myself.
They're there. if you all have been along the journey with this bust from the last, what is it now, 2 weeks, you can go back and watch our past VODs starting from the face to the black armor. Voldemort, which is the best method for priming? Brush, spray can, or airbrush? I assume brush is not good, but still.
Brush priming can be really, really effective. It just takes the longest. So it's the most frustrating, I think, of all of them. We're about to come out with brush primers for people when they travel and can't take spray cans
Or
and don't have their airbrush
yeah.
rig. So you just brush prime, or if like late in the model you want to touch something up, like I've got all these spots where I've rubbed the primer off of the sword as I've been gripping it with my thumb right there, and I could use the brush primer to just touch that up. So we've got matte black and white primers coming out for using on the brush. My preference is airbrush, but since we've come out and started working with the Color Forge and made our own primers and rattle cans, I really, really like our rattle can primers. They're absolutely phenomenal.
They are fantastic.
And are as matte as you need them to be, do great work of getting the model covered very quickly so you don't feel like you're wasting a lot. So yeah, I like both. We make airbrush and rattle can, so it's really just what do you prefer? If you have an airbrush primer is great. And then if you're not wanting to invest in an airbrush rig, then the spray paints are phenomenal. Oh, what do I do if I were to get paint on something while I was painting? I just go back and touch it up, Depending on what it was, like if I were to get a big stripe of like dark paint on something here, then it might be harder to go back and cover up the gold, so I'd have to maybe repaint that section. But yeah, you just go back and fix it. I usually spend time at the very end of the model going back and locating all the dings and doots where I hit it with the brush while I was talking and waving my hands around and get paint on my finger and grab it and leave a smudge print on something. That has happened. I'm never afraid of it. It's easy to fix.
Do you need an enclosure to airbrush in? Definitely want it to be more, unless depending on, I guess, your conditions, you definitely want an open air spot. But if you don't, you probably want like a box or like an enclosure for it, just so that it catches the paint.
Yeah, those little ventilation hoods that they make for airbrushing work great.
Yeah.
So I recommend those. We've got a couple of those around here that we would take to shows back when we used to take the airbrush rig to shows. We don't do that very often anymore. Too much of a hassle. Although at Adepticon this year, we might take the airbrush because they have a 1/4-inch compressed air at the outlets at the booth.
Really?
Yeah, so we don't even have to take a compressor. We run off the building's compressor and you just have an air hose. So it doesn't make any noise. You don't hear it. It's just air at the booth. So I'm like, heck yeah.
Really?
So we'd probably do the airbrush at Adepticon. It costs like $200 to get compressed air for the whole weekend.
Wow.
That's done deal. Now we have an airbrush we can show off, so that'll be great.
That's actually incredible. That's really cool.
Yeah, but those hoods are nice. As with anything, you don't want to be breathing in particulates into your lungs. So, the acrylic paint is generally pretty wet and doesn't put a lot of particulates into the air. It's not like, hairspray and stuff like that puts a lot of breathable crap out. But still, you got to be careful because a lot of that has to do with how you're spraying.
Monument Jabe. What? That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah, right?
Super cool.
I found that out while you were gone, Jabe.
I airbrush in my garage, but I also have a air purifier, just like a fan desk one.
Uh-huh.
And I just keep that on, and actually I found that it grabs quite a bit. So I actually really just keep that on, and then I'll check the filter, and it's definitely doing the job. But again, it's my whole garage, so it's pretty open.
These are so weird.
What's that?
It's like they put them on the skull. It's like the sculptor put these on there with an expectation of doing something cool with them, and then realized that the way they were cutting the bust, you'd never see what they turned into. So they're just like suspenders. Like they just have the visual of having suspenders on because they don't exist down below.
Yeah.
And you would never look at them anyway. This is the money shot for this guy. There's nothing here. There's no cloth sash down below or anything. So they just look like suspenders. So I almost hate calling attention to them by painting them white, but kind of what they are.
They are.
Now it sucks because if I had a little bit more space, I really like the way this has the dags, the little spiked stuff on it is really bitching. So painting them white with a little red accoutrement would be neat.
In a Chechapi.
Because he's got all this on the cloak and such. So that would be really cool. I just don't know that I have the patience to try to find a way to paint that down in there. Right? Because I would definitely get red paint all over my painted shoulder pads, and I don't know that that's what I want to be doing. So we're probably not going to do that. I can pretty much guarantee that won't happen. Some white. Ta-da! Because it's white cloth.
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways to do like filtration boxes. I have a buddy who does Cerakoting. He built out this whole box with obviously that's a way more extreme use case, but you can build out like filter boxes and
you need to be able to move a lot of particulates with Cerakoting. So you gotta be serious about it. Otherwise you breathe in all that crap.
Yep. Oh, it's already 3:40.
Crazy. These streams have been going by so fast these last few weeks, which is great because it means we're really focused, having a great time. But holy cow, I don't want it to be done. Most times I'm like, I'm not ready to be finished. I just got started.
It's going kind of back to the couple of the older questions about like Baby J and all of that too. This stream, especially when you watch Jason or Baby J, when it's just them by themselves, it definitely requires a lot more demand as well, and it definitely is very focusing, especially with the questions and stuff like that. So it's a very good format that we can focus on, which is cool.
Yeah, people have been blowing us up. For those of you that have been sending messages, thank you again. We love that everybody's having such a great time with the new format. The attentiveness has been great. We've been back on track with really focusing on, we're still able to tell some bad fart jokes, but moreover than not, the goal is to really get you pumped about painting.
Yeah. And when we're spending the time to hopefully teach you guys something about our products too, that gives you more confidence to just start the process. That's kind of the hardest part about painting sometimes, is just getting going. Analysis paralysis.
Yep, 100%. Oh my God, I watched 18 videos. I'm still scared to pick up the paintbrush.
And sometimes, like when you watch those videos, your mind has already done it, like in your mind, right? I don't know what that's called, but when you say something or you see something enough, your mind thinks that it's already done it. Yeah. I don't know what that's called, but that's what videos tend to do. So, here at least we're hopefully getting you enough knowledge to get you going.
Actually doing it.
Yep. Dusty Hobbies, thank you for that Prime sub. Appreciate it.
Glad to see everybody. Hope the week is starting off great. Been having a blast working on Antonio El Tigre, the legally distinct Primarch of the First Legion.
Nicholas, well, I certainly miss seeing Baby J. It is nice being able to focus on one mini being painted instead of having a two-split screen of my focus. Yep.
That was the goal. We had made a decision, regardless. And like I said, and like Chris has mentioned, we'll have Baby J and Jen over in the guest chair quite often. But one of the things was to really keep us focused and almost hyper-focused on what we're teaching.
Yeah.
And to do less of the defocused painting where it's just like, oh, we'll just paint this random thing. We'll really zone in and pick some really cool stuff to paint that can help teach you things you might be, hurdles you might be experiencing in your own life with armies and things, even if you're not painting a oversized Space Marine bust. You're trying white and thin blue over it, but it looks terrible. So add a third step, because paint the runes white, right? And then edge highlight, like the runes are sunken in. Make sure that you thin your white way down and almost use it like a wash and put it in each rune. It'll dry to where it's more white around the edges. Then go in and paint the inside with white, but leaving a little bit of texture. Then put your thin blue in it to brighten it up. Then go back with the white and highlight the middle of each rune and the edges again, right? So now you have blue and white working together, but you got to do it in multiple layers. And if the white is too stark, thin your blue down more and put another coat of blue over it. It'll darken the first blue, but then over the top of the white makes it lighter blue, so now it looks like you have multiple blues. And then go back with a little bit of white inside the rune. And you just keep repeating the process of white and then thin blue. Then sketch in some white towards the inside and keep making the letter of the rune smaller and smaller as you paint towards the middle of it, and put another layer of blue, and so on and so forth. As you do that, the blue becomes darker towards the outside, brighter towards the middle, and makes the rune look like it's glowing. Just always remember to do the edges again with the brightest color around the edge of the rune so that it is picking up that shine. Tony the Tiger, not Andy. It's
no, it's Andy Tiger.
It's Anthony. Tony the Tiger, that's the whole thing, right?
I like the idea that every passing day, Antonio Tigre's name will slowly degrade to just Del Andy Tiger.
No, it's Tony the Tiger. That's the whole point. They're great. Yeah, Voldemort, you got it. You're already on the way.
Voldemort,
so just add
great
that
questions.
extra step and you'll nail it. I
Great
think you'll find that clears it up. You're already on the right path. Not simple to do, but once you get it, you'll be super stoked. All right, so now I'm going to go back and take our dark yellow green, and we're just going to base all this stuff. It's time to paint the things that I've been holding off on painting. Dang it. I'm going to paint all this. I don't know where I'm going to hold the model if I paint the sword. The sword has been my thumb rest this entire project.
Well, it's kind of the last big piece, but you're right. I've been noticing, literally until you talk about it, it kind of fades away.
Yeah.
But now it's not.
Now when you stick it right back and paint it green, it's like a sore thumb. It's like, oh, forgot about that piece.
People on vids make it so easy looking, but it's not. Yeah, that's why we try to, obviously that's why we have the VODs here, because you can see something start from, start to finish, right?
No camera tricks, no skips.
No cameras, and that's like when we make the videos out of the VOD content, we were talking about that today. It's like, what do you include? What do you not include? After a while, then it just becomes another VOD, so we definitely want to show you guys the whole process. That's why we stream it live.
Yeah, I always make fun of it that so many videos out there are like, oh, do a circle, draw another circle, now finish the owl,
Yeah.
And they show you the finished owl, and it's like, it went from circle, circle, triangle to, holy hell, that owl looks spectacular. And they're like, see, easy as 1, 2, 3. You should be able to do this in 15 minutes. And I feel like our painting world has devolved into some of that.
The short attention span looking.
Which is, I get it. Not everybody has the time to watch a 3-hour VOD. Yeah. Totally understand. I don't expect that everybody should. But if you really are intent on getting good at something, you got to invest some time in it.
Yeah.
Right? And I think that we've kind of gotten it to a point where we are instant gratification hunting, and everybody's looking for a silver bullet. What's the magic way to do skin? There isn't one. But there's about 50 million ways that you might find one out of that you really like. So let's send you on that journey. Let's show you something really cool that you can get behind. So yeah, we try not to cut anything out. I don't paint the models that I paint on stream at any other time anymore. There used to be times where I would, on weekends, come in and, maybe finish up this sword so we could move on to the next part. We don't do that anymore. We may not finish the model on stream because of that. Then I'll finish it off stream, but you won't see it again until it's done. And I will have shown you how to do all of the in-between stuffs. But I just like, we pick models. Number one, we have the luxury of being able to paint with Rule of Cool here on the stream. I can be like, what model do I want to paint today? And then you guys just have to deal with it, which is sad, but fair.
No, harsh, but fair.
Harsh, but fair. That's what it was. Not sad. Harsh, but fair.
Harsh, but fair. Can you come down just a touch, Jason?
Oh, sorry. Better?
Yep, that's perfect. Harsh, but fair.
Harsh, but fair.
But my massive back tattoo says, chat.
Yes. It's his tramp stamp, actually. He keeps calling it a back tattoo to avoid ridicule, but it's a tramp stamp.
It's a tramp stamp, and then on each side it has 2 emojis with winky faces. That's what it is.
Really? I missed
Harsh,
the winky faces.
But fair. Wink.
Oh. How funny, dude. He's very proud of it. Once you get him drinking.
Once you get him drinking. That's what I'm known for, chat. My drinking.
Once you get Chris dancing on tables, showing off his tramp stamp.
Oh boy.
Here we go.
It's all out the window then.
Oh, there's another lion on the sword because
look at that.
Wait a minute. I didn't have enough lions that I painted.
That's the 4th lion technically?
It's upside down, so.
No, wait. I see 3 lions right there. The shoulder, the sword, the gorget, his face, and then I guess the cloak too counts as a lion. Lots of lions, but there are no lions here. These are just tigers.
These are just tigers.
Mo, welcome in.
Nothing but tigers here. Nothing to see. Keep moving along. I hear Mo showed up.
Mo is here.
What up? At the end of the show. Mo, who was more important than us today? Who are you hanging out with? Most part of the cool kids club. Doesn't hangs out with cool kids.
Nicholas, I no longer want to know where Christopher wants to see himself in 5 years. That's funny. What color would you use to highlight your bright green?
Bright green, the bright green paint that we have?
Yeah.
Depends. What are you painting? The bright green could go to bright yellow green very easily. You could add bright yellow green to the bright green. You could use faded green if you wanted to tone it down. You could add faded green to bright green.
Faded green, great green.
Yeah, faded green into bright green will desaturate it, make it look, move it a little bit more towards like a military green highlight, but it depends on what you're looking for. I hate that I answer questions with questions all the time, but that's really, you got to think in terms of, okay, I don't look at color as having one answer. There's a ton of answers. What do you want the bright green to look like? Do you want to keep its vibrancy? Because it's a tremendously vibrant paint. If you do, then bright yellow green added to it is the way to go. Because that'll keep it vibrant and really awesome.
Nicholas is saying fluoro green ?
No, fluoro green's too transparent. The fluorescents are very transparent paints. They require something like a white underneath them to really get the color to work. So they're not meant to highlight other opaque colors. They just won't work.
Man, our fluoro green with our bright yellow green through an airbrush as a ghostly glow is a very fun color. Been really liking that.
Yeah, definitely. But you could even put white blue into bright green to desaturate it into a really neat kind of...
Oh, Lumberbean is doing salamander Space Marines.
Then I think I would do the bright yellow green into it. Would be your best bet.
Baby J painted some salamander-esque marines on Friday.
Yes, a whole squad.
The
Or a demi squad.
we did
4 guys.
5 guys.
They make great burgers. Love them.
Very, they're that's a great place to eat. Very underrated. But yeah, we did those 5 guys in 2 hours with Baby J. Started with Imperial Purple and Salamander Green from the Color Forge. Those with basically primed them in Imperial Purple, and then zenithal them with the green. Came out great, and then he highlighted those with green. You can see that whole workup from Friday.
Yeah, they look great. Very simple too.
Yep, super simple.
Like talk about oh yeah, my army's done.
Talk about a good 3-foot rule and just being done.
Yeah, especially being able to take the Color Forge stuff. For those of you that don't know, we are Color Forge North America as well.
Yep.
So you see us use a lot of the Color Forge colors, and you'll see our commercials and stuff. The only reason we are is because their sprays just open up a whole new world of getting good contrast and color on a model on your prime coat super fast.
Yeah.
Right. When the gang was like, we were doing shooting the commercials that show the sprays of color, and Chris came in and he goes, what about something like this? And he showed me the ghoul that you did, the thing from the Soulblight Gravelords, or the Flesh Eater Quartz.
Yep.
And I was like, oh my God, that model's basically done.
Yep.
Because you can do a zenithal, but in color with the Color Forge, and be getting a fantastic primer coat out of it at the same time with so little trouble that, if you're doing an army that is mostly the same color armor, it wouldn't work well for like a whole army of mercenaries that each model is its own character. But when doing repetitive units like Space Marines, that every unit is the same color, you could just knock out Space Marines like in no time with the Color Forge pre-coloring.
100%. And then he tied it all in with Noosh. It came out great.
So good. Easy. Had a customer send us a picture because he's like, look, I bought all the Color Forge. He literally bought every color.
Yeah.
I was like, do you have a plan for every color? He's like, no, I'm just so happy they're here now.
I know. It really is. It definitely opens up your eyes to stuff when you start really thinking about how you could, because I have my whole, I'm going to do goblins. I'm going to redo a bunch of terrain just to get it started. It just gets like 50% of it done.
Well, and when you find out, like if you use a lot of Citadel colors, like a lot of new painters do, you find out that Citadel doesn't match their sprays to their color of the same name 100%. And the army painter does. Like just blatantly is like, yep, this is, the Citadel exact reference to the pot color. And so we've had a lot of people that have really enjoyed that.
Okay, I get you.
Because each Citadel color in the pot,
mm-hmm.
the Citadel sprays don't match to their own pots.
Hmm.
They're just a hair off sometimes in hue or shade. And so Colorforge match their colors better than they do. We have a lot of customers that are like, I need this, particular green. We don't have the Dark Angels green equivalent yet. We have the Salamander one, but not the Dark Angel one.
Sir Addy says, recently I got heavily surprised by your red gray. It dries so much darker than it comes onto the mini. You really have to let it dry to be able to choose the next step in hue.
All of the paints with the ultra matte finish will be darker than they are when they're wet. That's just kind of part of the nature of a non-reflective paint, because it's not that they're actually any darker. It's just that when they're wet, they're reflecting light that makes them look lighter, and the light's fooling you into what that color actually is. when they dry and they're no longer wet, that's the actual color. So yes, dealing with ultra matte can sometimes you gotta learn. Once you know, again, and it sounds funny, it wasn't necessarily engineered on purpose to be this way, but our caps are so great because you'll have that little bit of dried paint on the top of the cap that shows you always exactly what color you're about to get. These doohickeys are really strange. I'm not sure what they are.
They look like runes or something.
Like trinkets.
Because some of them are universal, or not universal, the same.
Yeah, they're all just like rectangular things. They're like trinkets, right? It's just a bunch of trinkets. They're different shapes, and you know, some of them go horizontal, some of them go vertical. They're not tied together. They're like trinkets that are like welded onto the suit, right? Like from all the worlds he's conquered.
Sir Addy, wasn't a criticism, just a report. Yeah, thank you.
No, I didn't take it as such. Yeah. It's just something you do have to get used to with matte colored paints. And it's something that satin colored paints that are like our competitors use. Most of our competitors are not ultra matte like we are. And that light makes the color appear lighter than it really is, the shine of the satin. We do make some satin and gloss paints, and they will, you know, stay, I guess, what you would call more true to their wet color when they dry, because they still have some of that shine.
I mean, even look at the color you're painting on right now, the dried bits compared to the wet bits. You can kind of see that as they dry, they become that color.
Yeah. Yeah, the play of light across the wet paint is always a fun little tidbit that you got to deal with, and that's why we choose ultra matte colors rather than satin like our competitors use. Is that while the color itself may vary from your expectation from when it's wet to when it's dry, once you have it on the model, you never are seeing anything other than the actual paint that you painted. The light in the room won't influence it as much. So you will see your highlights exactly the way you put them on the model. I, growing up painting, always hated that I would get these satin paints that would cause me to think I had highlighted an area because the light in the room was shining on them in a particular direction. And I'm like, oh yeah, that highlight looks great. And then, you know, in another light, they'd look completely different. Like under fluorescence, they look completely different than they would in my room with my incandescent painting light on my desk. And as I grew up and as more paints were available and adding matte mediums to my paints to not have to do that, and always matte varnishing. One of the big things I was like, why am I always matte varnishing? I like the look of it better when the model was matte at the end and that shine, that fake shine went away. I was like, I don't want his cloak to be shiny.
Yeah.
But the tester's enamels I were using were all, freaking gloss. Because they made them to paint like model cars instead of military models. You know, and I'm painting a tiger tank. Like, this shouldn't be shiny.
Jason, it's 4:00.
4:00. Time to stop. I got the base coats on all the rest of the gold, so.
Nice.
I got a little purity seal there. Oh, I didn't. I got to paint this little, so you can bear with me for just a second because I got this little chain.
Oh, nice catch there.
I remember when I was painting the deal on the shoulder pad, I was like, what is this nonsense? And again,
it's a little chain.
Little chain, you know, because who doesn't have like a little dangly chain to deal with on their armor plate?
Dusty Hobbies, thank you for that Prime sub. I think I had said thank you, but just wanted to double check that I did.
Something like this chain is so wispy and small that by the time we paint it, I don't even know that all the colors I'll use will even read on here. You know, the orange and everything. But we paint it with it anyway.
Nice.
Because we're crazy like that. But I got the spikes on the elbow that everybody's been probably wondering what the hell color I was going to paint them, since I didn't paint them the black metal of the armor when I did it initially.
I guess so. I thought they were already black.
No, well, they were the dark gray primer.
Yeah.
So they just had been fooling everybody the whole time. But my intention was to paint them gold, but because I kept putting my thumb on them to hold the model. This is one of the funniest things when painting models, and you get used to holding them while you paint them, is that now that I'm painting the parts that I was holding, I don't know how to hold the model. Because I can't hold the rest because I've already painted it, right? So now I got to use the cork correctly. So now you'll see if I can keep myself disciplined enough to just keep the cork as my handle and not grip all these parts again. But we're getting close, chat. We're getting really close.
Look at that from further away. You can see it all coming together.
Very nice. This is our money shot here. Got the glow on the face I'm liking. I might brighten up that cheek a little bit. His left cheek, this cheek over here.
Nice.
Sir Addy, thank you for your time. Cling film, yes, I don't have any. Right. Zazin, Jason started out painting. I painted 35th. Well, okay, so my first models that I painted were like Dungeons and Dragons miniatures back in the early 80s. Like very early 80s, like 1980. In 1979, 1980. And then from then, like Ral Partha and Grenadier models. And then from there, Battletech miniatures. But I had always been building models since I was like 6, 7, 8 years old with my dad, plastic models, but I never really was allowed to paint them, right? Because the enamel, the fumes, my parents, yada, yada, but I was putting them together with like plastic glue that you could get high off of. So I don't know. They thought the paint was bad and the glue was fine. And then I went from miniatures because the friends that I had in my area that I would play the miniature games with, like Starfleet Battles and Battletech and all that, were older than me and grew up and went off to college. And so I was home alone, and so I started into 35th scale military modeling is really where I found my stride, and I started doing a lot of Tamiya models, mostly ground-based 35th scale military. So tanks, military figures, took a class from Shepard Payne, famous diorama builder, and read all his books and soaked up as much info as I could as a kid and really just started converting models. There weren't a lot of figures back then. To me, I had like for the Germans, you might have had like a field crew, like a field command crew, and the one crew that came with a half-track model that were running alongside, and there might have been a couple of miniatures that came with one of the Panzer IVs, and that was it. And maybe like an MG crew. And so I get the miniatures, and Shep had shown me how to like take a razor knife and cut the back of their knee into a triangle and then heat it up and bend their leg. So instead of standing straight, the knee was bent. And so I started converting, and then I got into diorama building, and that was kind of where my modeling and painting life was for a couple of decades, right? Because that was all through college and then out of college until in the early to mid 90s, I guess the mid 90s, I found miniatures again. And of course, 35th scale is still miniature, right? It's still very small. But I found miniatures, like wargaming style miniatures, like my first Space Marine and all that kind of stuff from Rogue Trader. And then in the late 90s, got my first like Space Marine Army and started playing the games again and got back into Battletech and all those things that I had missed out on for decades. And then, yeah, ever since, miniatures. I haven't done any much 35th scale military modeling in a long time. Only stuff that we've done on stream to show particular techniques.
Rocket Chicken. What's up, Fuse? My first day back streaming with a 96-month sub. Hope you're staying warm.
Fan-freaking-tastic. It's way too cold for people to survive here. I think right now it's probably like 60-something. It's like 37 in the morning. I don't know how people... You can't live with that. I nearly died on the way to work today. 61 right now, Jen says. We don't pay taxes for this, people. Fix it. So you'll see Chris putting up all the major links there in chat. It's 8 degrees for Orky fish meat. Ugh. Yeah. Ugh. You need more digits in that one, preferably in the positive side. Just Grumpy's like, I got a hood on. It's freezing. I know, he's in Arizona too. It's -2 over the pond. We had a group from Europe we were talking to today, and it was 3. Ugh. I'm like, they need more numbers. We're going to ship you some more numbers. Thank you so much for hanging out with us. Remember, we stream Monday through Friday here from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. Mountain Standard Time, Arizona, at our HQ, Monument Hobbies. You can check the links that Chris put up there to get to monumenthobbies.com, where you can see our entire line of Pro Acrylic paints, Pro Series brushes, all the stuff you see me using on stream here. If you want to catch up with the complete VOD, if you joined us late, we stream live on Twitch and YouTube, and it goes straight to the live tab on our YouTube channel when we're done here, so you can catch up with all the things you may have missed, or just go watch it again because it was so much fun. And then also check out our FLGS link, which will take you to the list of local hobby suppliers that might be in your area. We've got hundreds of suppliers across the globe that sell Monument Hobby products. Please give them a chance, support your local dealers as they do all the heavy lifting and keep the hobby growing local to you. Hang around. Chris is going to find somebody to raid, so show some love, hit that follow button, and we will catch you back here tomorrow. Have a great night, gang.